This third one's about perception, and really, we've already kind of touched on the topics, but the complexities of what defines good or evil or wicked. Um, and it's really kind of about the circumstances within context, not having the ability to influence outside perceptions if those context or if the contextual information is omitted or left out. Um, at the end of the day, whatever the tale, how hard you fought, how lazy you were, whatever, the outcome is the only thing that matters. And the only thing that is seen as far as outcome is what people perceive, not what you know. Because what you know, you can have a breakdown of what went wrong, what went right, how hard, like, oh, it was the thought that counts, right? No, it's perception. Perception is reality. And this is a lesson I learned in my own life. Perception is reality. So ultimately, when you're talking about the complexity of good versus evil, or, good versus wicked in the case of this book, that perception is the only thing that matters, and all of the context gets lost or ignored. Ignorance is the opposite or ignorance is the cause of that omission. That omission, like, you're being ignorant, you're literally ignoring facts. And so, when it comes to this context between the two witches, between Elphaba and Galinda, their shared history doesn't support the divergence of their comprehension of how things go. So ultimately, their fundamental, like, belief systems challenge their shared history. It doesn't matter if they were friends in school. What matters is how they chose to live their lives as adults after they separated from one another. And ultimately, in the book, it fails. They chose two different paths and they did diverge. In the play, they kind of like secretly long for each other, and they have this, this moment where they, the song "For Good," I have been changed for the better, like a handprint on my heart, etc., etc. And also, like, Defying Gravity. Defying Gravity is the pivotal end of that first act, where they're sitting there and they're standing. They just had this fight with the wizard. They're being chased through the palace, and they're up in this attic, and she's got the broom, and they're like, oh, this is the last time we're going to see each other. Like, go out there, fight for everything you can. I'll sit here and fight the good fight. And then they sing Defying Gravity, and she's like, you don't want her, you want me. I'm the one you want. I'm the wicked one. It's me. And she goes up and, if you care to find me. And so she sings the song to kind of, like, illustrate how she's defying, not gravity, she's defying destiny. She's defying that pre-written story that everybody has told her she has to comply to, and she absolutely does not want to, because it means terrible things. It means that her own internal conscience is going to be in conflict with what she's done for the rest of her life, unless she stands up for what she believes. And she believes that animals have a fundamental right to live their lives just as the humans, because they have souls. And that is the foundation of her belief system. Whereas she recognizes in the play that Glinda can't walk that path. She's just too soft. And so she has another part to play. Go out there, make a name for yourself, have a good life, and root for me. So Defying Gravity is a pivotal part of the play. Well, in the book, they just kind of like, Glinda asks her, like, hey, did you find some food? And she throws her some moldy bread and says, this is going to get you to the next town, but we're not going to see each other again. And Glinda's like, no, you can't leave. Just come back. And she's like, tell everybody that I kidnapped you, and they'll believe you, and just kind of get away from me. Get as far away from me as you can, because I am nothing but death. And so that in the book becomes the part where she's kind of like, it takes a step from that. So that's the Defying Gravity moment in the book. It takes kind of a time jump into her, like, militia days, where she's kind of like fighting the good fight. Like, she's part of this guerrilla warfare where they're like planting pipe bombs and, upheaval against the established government and things like that. Trying to really make some, behind the scenes political moves, that include assassinations, bombings, stealing, things like that. And ultimately, her final act is something that, you know, she can't walk away from. And unfortunately, she's kind of fostered this relationship with Fiyero. They've become lovers, and he's become so engrossed in her life that he's following her and trying to figure out what she's doing. She's like, you have to be gone. Do not follow me. Ultimately, we learn that she's, you know, trying to assassinate Madam Morrible, and it ends badly. We don't know what happened. All we know is that she shows up at a Monterey, which is like a nun convent, with blood on her hands, and she just won't speak. But during that situation, so, you know, she's left Galinda after this meeting with the wizard, and then she's kind of gone into this like vigilante justice, like, you know, terrorism. Actually, like, if I'm going to be accused of being a terrorist, I'm going to do it. And that's kind of the moment where she's accepting, I am wicked. And if they're going to call me wicked, I'm going to act wicked. I'm going to throw the bombs. I'm going to stab with this dagger. I'm going to do the things that they're accusing me of doing. Why? Because they're going to believe it anyway, so may as well try to do it if it's going to make a difference. Inevitably, she ends up, you know, failing and escaping, but Fiyero, quite comically in the book, has some diarrhea, and he had to go back to her apartment and blows up the place. He sits there, sprays the, you know, lights some matches and shit, and the cat's looking at him like, ew, what did you just do? And then all of a sudden these shadows come in and attack him. And that's the last we hear of Fiyero. So we understand that Fiyero is then dead, or at least they say he's dead. And so, plot point, from there, Elphaba goes to this Monterey, this convent, where she's meeting Mother Yakel, and Mother Yakel's like bringing her back to health and kind of like raising her up. And I think it said that she was there for 7 years or something like that. And they kind of keep time jumping and telling the story of, you know, this quiet Saint Elphaba, the green girl, not to be confused with Elphaba, the terrorist that everybody should know of. But, you know, there's only one green person. How could they not know it was her? But beside the point. With that said, eventually she does leave the convent, and she leaves the convent with a little boy named Lear. And in the beginning, this is just some orphaned kid that was sent with her by Mother Yakel, who she has no association with. It was just part of the terms and conditions of her being released from the convent. And so she's sent on this journey, and her journey is intentionally to go to the Vincus in order to confess her sins to Sarima, who is Fiyero's child bride. You know, this arranged marriage that he had when he was a child that she knew of well in advance when he was at Shiz, and still ended up sleeping with him and conceiving this child. And so she wanted to go and confess to Sarima, not just that she was her lover, but that she was the cause of his death. And through that journey, they end up going to Kiyamoko, which you would know in the Wizard of Oz film as the castle from which she, you know, sends off her armies of the flying monkeys and the Vincus troops, the Winkies. And so, when she gets to this castle, she realizes that trying to fight the negative publicity that has been thrown against her name, it's just going to be too difficult to unravel all of that fake news, that she just chooses to accept that everybody just calls her a witch. Even people who have no clue of her past, she just seems kind of witchy. She's got the looks, she's got the attitude, and there's some strange magic-y type things that happen around her. And so she starts referring to herself as the witch. And when she gets to Kiyamoko, they actually... Sarima actually admits that she recognizes who she is. She's like, but for the sake of what you're trying to do here, I know you don't want people to know who you are. I will just call you Auntie Guest, because you're a guest in this castle. And the kids, of course, affectionately call her Auntie Witch, and that sticks. Even Lear calls her Auntie Witch, even though later it's determined that she is his mother. And he has these fantasies that Fiyero is actually his father, and that actually comes true too. And we'll talk about the power of suggestion and all that in a minute. But what she chooses to do from her parapet, from her castle, is she wants to stand up for what she believes in, and do it to the best of her ability without being blatantly public. And so she's studying. She finds this book in the library, and she's just trying to, kind of figure it out because it's really kind of hard to read. And Surima's like, oh yeah, some old man gave that to me a long time ago and said it needed to be protected and said just to keep it here. But I can't read it. It's all gibberish. And she's like, I can kind of make out what's in it. Elphaba did. But nobody else could read it. And so she's kind of studying it because it had kind of this occult feel to it. And that ends up being the Grimoire. The page of the book that the wizard said he wanted, the book is the Grimoire. And this is what she finds in Kamako. How did it get there? Who knows? We'll talk about that in a second too. So we're getting the geography set up now. So now she is set up in her seat of power as the de facto kind of power in Kamako in the West. She's not the leader by any means. She is living with the dowager princess because Fiyero is dead, and her children. She has 2 sons and a daughter. Her 2 sons are the inheritors of that principality. They're going to be the leaders when they grow up of their Winky tribe. And so Arjiki tribe. And so they have to grow up. Well, she's just kind of there existing. And Surima says, I refuse to let you unburden yourself with your confession. You're going to live in this dissatisfied, unfulfilled need. And maybe one day, once I feel like you've redeemed yourself for whatever it is you think you're guilty of doing, then you can confess to me and I will give you permission. But since this is my house, I make the rules and I will not let you confess yet. And ultimately, she ends up dying before Elphaba has the chance. And so, but they both kind of have this unspoken knowledge that they kind of know what happened. And Surima kind of thinks that maybe Fiyero was murdered by Galinda's husband in a jealous rage for a rumored, dalliance that they had in the Emerald City. Or something like that. She has these theories. She doesn't know the truth, and she doesn't want to know the truth, ultimately. But the sisters, so she lives with her other sisters, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And they're unable to get married because the patriarch of their family is dead, and their sister's a dowager, and until she can get married, they can't get married, because that's just how their politics work. And so they're all kind of like living as these little old biddies in this castle, raising these 3 kids, and now Auntie Guest shows up with this new boy who is also the son of Fiyero, but he doesn't know it. And they all kind of like pick on him, and he's kind of this little wimpy weakling, and he's crying, and they call him fat. And there's a whole story there, but he is the subject of the second book, Son of a Witch, which ultimately is my favorite, if I don't count Wicked. So the sequel to Wicked is called Son of a Witch, and it's an amazing story. The other 2 books that follow that are I've only read one of them, Lion Among Men, and it was meh. Still great lore. I love lore, but Son of a Witch takes over the story of Lear. So you're kind of getting these introductions to Lear and how Auntie Witch is she really is the most powerful person in the castle. So she's almost like their protector, because she's just so stoic and so, angry all the time. Like nobody would dare fight her. And they also have these folklores, around the personification of power, the Cumbric Witch or Sister Saint Elphaba. So on the topic of perception, giving up and accepting that negative reputation is kind of the crux of the story. That is where she has given up her righteous fight to just be vindictive. So now she's gone from vindication to retribution. And she's lost so much along the way, and she holds so much guilt because she thinks she's responsible for all of that. And so you've got her in the West, so she's the Wicked Witch of the West, which she really is kind of calling herself because Nessa Rose, as a unionist theocrat, so she's the leader of Munchkinland, and she's this like really strict, dogmatic, theologically driven tyrant that Munchkinlanders are calling her the Wicked Witch of the East. So Elphaba says, well, if she's the Wicked Witch of the East, I'm the Wicked Witch of the West. Boom, now she's got the name. And then, of course, Glinda, everybody's like, oh, she's so good. And so she becomes Galinda the Good. Now you've got your power players. You've got your three adepts in the three lands. Not quite what Madam Morrible had said, but it's pretty much exactly how she said it would happen. You've got these three powerful women that are sub rosa controlling the citizens to kind of funnel or guide them in one direction or the other, and the wizard really wants to tap into that power. And you kind of get into the themes of friendship, devotion, affection, favoritism, dependency. Oh, my power's dying. Friendship, devotion, and affection, favoritism, dependency, and forgiveness. These are all major themes that are part of the end of the book. You've got Galinda's struggle between genuine empathy and her conflict with her social status. She has to present this like vapid character and not she can't allow people to see that she actually believes that Elphaba is right. She can't do that because it's too dangerous. Thoughts are dangerous. So you see her struggle. You've got Bach, who's devoted to Galinda at Shiz. Like, he will do anything for her, and he's like, I'm in love with you. Love at first sight. And she's like, I can never love you because you're short, because remember, she's racist. And he's like, great, well, if you can't love me, at least let me be your close friend for the rest of your life, because I want to be next to you forever. And she's just kind of like, okay. And in the play, the musical play, you know, there's the Dancing Through Life, and on the soundtrack you can hear the whole exchange where he's like, listen, Miss Galinda, I'll be right over there saving a dance for you all night. And she's like, oh, how sweet. But you know what would be even better is you to go dance with that girl on the chair, Nessa Rose. And so that kind of ties into his story. Now, in the Broadway musical, Bach is the Tin Woodman, you know, and he, you know, it's the reason that happens is unfortunate, but it's ironic that it's dramatic irony. We know the reason, but he's blind to it, or he's ignorant to it, or he's in denial. So Nessa Rose is so upset that he won't love her that she kind of emotionally reacts and calls him heartless, and her power makes his heart go away. And ultimately, Galinda has to intervene to prevent him from dying, and that's why he becomes the Tin Woodsman. So the Tin Man was created out of necessity to stop Bach from dying, because Nessa Rose accidentally made his heart disappear. If I Only Had a Heart. So now we've got If I Only Had a Heart and the Cowardly Lion Cub that escaped from Shiz when Elphaba was a kid. But Bach's devotion to Galinda is what makes Nessa Rose kind of react that way. In the book, they don't really talk about that. Bach just ends up on a farm with Mila, and they got some fat kids, and Elphaba stops by and realizes that he's actually like really afraid of her, and they're like holding axes like, oh, we're gonna defend ourselves. And she's like, oh, you're afraid of me too, how dare, you know? And ultimately she's like, well, they kind of, his weakness of character prevented him from defying his knowledge that I'm not that person they were saying I am. And she's kind of offended and hurt, and she should be, because she lost a friend. Because ultimately he loves her, but he is scared of her because of the lies that were told about her. And her emotional reaction to him behaving that way and holding an axe to protect himself is making him even more scared and making her even more angry. And so, you know, again, it's this complicated story of like perception and reality and friendship and love and loyalty. And ultimately she's losing. She's lost Galinda. She never had Nessa. Nessa was just lying to her. Her father only kind of casually liked her, but not as much as the other two. And Lear is just kind of this like fat little lard of a child that she doesn't even want. The only person that ever really showed her any real affection was Chistery, the baby monkey. So we're talking about like these interpersonal relationships that are happening, and you know, you get that throughout the entire book, but these are the overarching themes that are kind of driving her to this character foundation of being affected by her negative reality. Everybody hates her for one reason or another, whether it's real, justified or not. And, you know, one of the real things that, and it's really kind of like evident, and nobody really realizes that it hurts her as much as it does, are the shoes, those slippers that Frex made for Nessa Rose, because all she ever wanted to do was make her father proud of her, but she didn't have that religious ideology that Nessa did, and so he always considered Nessa his pet, and he doted on her. One, she can kind of blend in if she had like a shawl to hide the fact that she doesn't have arms, because she's not green, but also because she shared the same ideological conceptions of religion in that he had, that he was a preacher for. And Elphaba did not. She is strictly like anarchist, almost atheist, not quite. And so she feels like her father abandoned her, and you know, the gift that was given to her should have been given to him, given to Elphaba instead of Nessa. And also Elphaba has kind of this resentment towards Nessa herself directly, because she feels like Nessa's handicap made it so that Elphaba had to give her her childhood. She spent her entire young life caring for this sister because somebody needed to. I mean, she had nanny, but Frex wasn't doing anything. He was just a pastor. Their son, Shell, just kind of a little asshole. And their mother died when Shell was born, but she also was kind of selfish too. So she gave her life to Nessa before they went to Shiz. And then when she went to Shiz, she kind of got a chance to kind of escape all of that. And then when Nessa asked her to come back and help her rule Munchkinland, she said, "No, I finally got away from you. This is your thing. And if you fuck it up, you fuck it up. This is your life. If they want to depose you, let them. I'm not going to stop it from happening." And she ultimately had some shame around that decision, because she felt like if she was there, she could have stopped it from happening. But she wasn't there. And ultimately, the house dropped, and she lost the slippers because of it. And it created a huge rift between her and Galinda. And also set into, you know, effect the sequence of events that inevitably lead to her end. And so when it comes down to this, you know, the story is really kind of focusing on, what is your legacy? What do you leave behind? What is the tale that is told of the life that you lived? Not by you, because you don't have a say in it. It's about how other people perceived you. You know, victory is written by the victor, or history is written by the victor. So, you know, she has no control over her reputation. History is going to remember her as this evil creature, this villain, same as her sister. And ultimately, her legacy is of terror, horrors. Her first word when she was born was horrors. She was quoting Turtleheart when he was describing what was happening politically in Quadling Country. And ultimately, the book is, you know, the later book, so moving into Son of a Witch, A Lion Among Men, and Out of Oz, and the later, you know, Another Day, I think is called the trilogy of the granddaughter reign. It kind of talks about Elphaba's legacy and how it affects her descendants over time. And that's, so these are the general themes of the book in whole, but also kind of hitting on the plot points about, you know, what makes the book different from the play.